I would like to put a trigger warning here since there isn't a flare for it. This story contains dating violence. According to my previous post, I had asked Chris to send Jay his encounter with Death to send to me. I know I called Death the Grim Reaper because I do like alliteration from time to time. So I'm posting it because it did give me chills reading it. Jay and Chris did admit that Jay tried to help Chris through the trauma of almost being stabbed to death, but Chris said he wanted to shove it to the side and not think about it again, so he didn't have to deal with it. Unfortunately, it was still haunting him and he had to find something to keep the memories away, which led him to pot to calm his anxiety, and when that stopped working, he was led to heroin. Somehow, that led to their sister Holly falling for heroin. Chris's ex-girlfriend's name has been changed to Ivy for privacy reasons, and because of how toxic she was, she's like Poison Ivy. According to Jay, after the stabbing, Ivy went to her friend's house to tell her what happened, saying something like, "I just killed a guy." Ivy's friend told Ivy to go take a shower and said that she'll dispose of the evidence. Instead of getting rid of the evidence, she called the police on Ivy while she was washing up, so Ivy ended up getting arrested. Ivy had gotten 10 years in jail for what happened. So, on with his story. I think I should start at the very beginning. I actually can't remember when my relationship with Ivy turned sour. In fact, at first I didn't realize something was off. Maybe I should have listened to my parents and siblings when they said they didn't like her. However, I kind of ignored them because they didn't like anyone, to be honest. My twin sister Holly was too busy smoking weed, and our twin brother Jolly seemed to have hit his emo phase by disliking everyone when he was working part-time. Our mother was too busy with her crack addiction, and our dad was busy substituting his angel dust addiction with alcoholism. A year later, he dropped his alcoholism to go back to the angel dust habit. They didn't notice the abuse for 6 months. It started off small, so again, I can't remember when it began. I remember that at first, there were times that she got mad because I didn't text her right away, and she got mad if I replied 2 minutes later. She would give me the cold shoulder for a few days. She'd get mad if I questioned her opinions. Once, she was talking about how her friend was totally boning this one guy. She had exclaimed, "She is!" I was confused by that logic and asked, why would she? Isn't she a lesbian? Ivy had to counter with, "But I know she is." I was still confused. But why would she screw this guy if she's into girls? Ivy was annoyed with me. Ugh, why do I have to explain to you things about my friend who I've known longer than you? I knew her a lot longer than you, and you shouldn't question something like that. I pointed out, that's because it doesn't make sense. Ivy groaned and yelled, "You're not listening to me. You never listen to me. Why don't you listen for once?" That should have been the first red flag, but I didn't think of it as one. Once she gave me a week-long silent treatment for not walking her to class, it was my fault for forgetting, right? Well, she didn't tell me anything about walking her to class. She told me that she said to walk her to class, and I just didn't listen to her. Then the belittling came when we were watching the Stephen King movie, Creepshow. Ivy had sounded disgusted when she asked, "You're into horror?" I shrugged. "I suppose." Ivy asked, "How do you guess that you're into horror? That makes no sense. You watch and read horror. That means you're into horror." I said, "I read and watch it from time to time. I wouldn't say I'm into horror." Ivy gave me this gem. "Well, when you end up committing a school shooting, they're going to blame poor Stephen King for it." I was so confused. When I become... Ivy nodded. "Yes, you were also bullied too." I responded, "Yeah, that's because my name is Christmas. I would make fun of a dude named Christmas too." "That's because your parents are crackheads. And you'll still turn into a school shooter." Ugh. Could you believe what he had to go through? Alright, sorry, I'll keep on reading for you guys. Another example, I had a panic attack during a thunderstorm. The reason for that was because when my siblings and I were 8, we were being watched by a babysitter, and apparently I was too rowdy for the babysitter, and she locked me in the shed for 3 hours during a thunderstorm as punishment. Instead of claustrophobia or nyctophobia, I get astrophobia. Anyway, for some reason, Ivy loves thunderstorms. She likes sitting and watching lightning. Anyway, she made me go outside to watch it with her despite me saying no, that I didn't want to, and she didn't care about what I wanted, which basically sums up our relationship. While I was watching the stupid storm, I ended up having a panic attack. She seemed amused by me experiencing one. Ivy spoke in a childish sort of voice. "You're scared of thunderstorms?" While I was in the midst of a panic attack, I nodded. Ivy laughed. You're 16 years old and you're scared of a little storm? What are you, 2? When a lightning flashed by a little too close, in my opinion, Ivy laughed even harder when I flinched. I was now in tears at this point because it was humiliating, and to make matters worse, I get humiliation tears. Ivy was now cackling with laughter and insulting me some more. She got bored with that and went inside her home, leaving me with a panic attack and humiliation. She made it worse when she told her friends about it. At least some of them didn't find it funny, but others did. The possessiveness came afterwards. The first time, a girl, Marisol, from my math class, came up to me to ask if she could borrow my homework to compare answers. So I let her copy my answers. She was using the wall and looking at my notebook as I held it up for her to copy. I liked Marisol. She was a nice person, but I found myself thinking that if I hadn't gotten together with Ivy, I would have asked her out. Also, maybe I would have asked her out too if she wasn't dating someone. Then Ivy had to come up looking pissed off. Her face was red, matching her red hair. I found myself thinking that she's the epitome of the saying, gingers have no soul. I realized that my relationship hit a low when I was thinking about dating some other girl and thinking that my girlfriend is evil. Ivy coldly asked, "What is going on here?" Marisol was confused. "I'm just comparing my math answers with Chris's." Ivy had crossed her arms and rudely asked, "Is that what it's called?" Marisol now sounded agitated. "Fine, I'm copying Chris's homework because I'm crap at math." I was beginning to get embarrassed because other students were beginning to stop and stare at us. Needless to say, Ivy stormed off in a huff. Marisol looked at me with pity and said, "I'm sorry you're with her." I nodded in agreement. Me too. The aftermath of that encounter still bothers me even now. Ivy had text-bombed me. She text-yelled at me about how I embarrassed her and that I should apologize for cheating on her. She was even insulting me for being stupid and all that bullcrap. She wasn't letting me get a word in. Really, she wasn't letting me respond. Jolly and I share a room, so he's obviously hearing the text bombing from Ivy. Jolly looked at me from the top bunk of the bunk bed, and he jokingly said, "Is your phone going to explode, or is it going to do some weird crap like smoke in your hand?" Oddly, I was very calm as I explained the situation of why Ivy was mad. Ivy's pissed for letting Marisol copy my homework. Ivy's saying that I cheated on her. "Who did she cheat on you with?" Jolly bluntly asked me. I was caught off guard by that question. What? Jolly explained it to me. "Everyone knows that's douchebag abuser behavior number 1. If they accuse you of cheating, that means they cheated on you." I really didn't want to believe him. I mean, Ivy loves me, right? Life is not some teen drama on TV. 3 words for you, dude. Ditch her. Before things get worse, said Jay. I really should have listened to him, but for some reason I didn't. I don't know why I didn't just listen. Of course, Ivy denied ever getting mad at me at school for letting Marisol copy my homework. She also got mad at me for eating lunch with my siblings at school. I just wanted to stay away from her for a day or so. I couldn't see my friends because Ivy hated them since their hobbies went with drugs and vandalism. Ivy wasn't into that kind of stuff, so therefore I shouldn't be friends with them. For some reason, I listened to her, so I ended up friendless. I still talk to them in private, though. Ivy ended up text-bombing me about hanging out with my pothead twin sister and creepy twin brother. I live with them, so I can hang out with them all the time. Why would I want to hang out with them and not her? She also sent me over 200 texts in just 5 minutes. I apologize for rambling, and I know you really want to get to the encounter with death, but okay. I'll try to sum it up quickly. First time she hit me, she gave me a panic attack. We were arguing about something that I apparently had done wrong. She got in my face and yelled some stupid stuff like, "I'll screw all your friends. I don't even care." And the first thing I say is, "So you screw my female friends too?" And then she slapped me right in the face, essentially slapping me right in a panic attack. She laughed at me and said that I deserved it. I wanted to believe that I didn't deserve it, but I got so twisted from her that I actually believed that I did. The second time she punched me, giving me a nice black eye. Holly was the first one to notice it when I came home. Our mom was passed out on the couch and our dad was passed out drunk on the coffee table. When I went into the kitchen, she was already at the dining table reading Twelfth Night. Holly looked up and slowly said, "Hi, Chris." My first thought was, she's high again. There's no difference between a high Holly and a regular Holly. The only difference between them is that Hi Holly talks more slowly when trying to be philosophical. Hi, I muttered back and went to the fridge. When I turned back around, Holly was right in my face, scrutinizing me. It was very uncomfortable since we haven't been that close since the three of us were in the womb or something. Holly came down from her high, surprisingly quick, and demanded, "Where's my field hockey stick?" Have I mentioned that she was on our school's field hockey team? I was confused. What? Holly very calmly said, "She punched you, so I'm going to break her face." I was panicking because I figured that if that happened, I would apologize for it and I would be hit, and I didn't want to be hit. I responded, "You don't have to do it." Holly nodded, still oddly calm, as she said, "Yes, I do. She hit you once, and she'll do it again." I must have made a weird face because she got even more pissed off. Holly was now speaking angrily. "Oh, I'm going to rip her guts out from her throat with my bare hands." She turned to leave the kitchen, so I grabbed her arm to keep her from doing that. "You don't have to." Holly turned around so quickly that I flinched, now out of habit because of Ivy. She sounded sad as she spoke. "She dug her claws in you. You gotta file a police report against her." "I doubt that would work," I responded. And it didn't. A bit later, after talking to Holly about it, I filed a report because Ivy's dad drove me to the police station to make sure that I do. Long story short, Ivy smashed my head onto the marble countertop at her home. She had one arm twisted behind my back and had my head pressed onto the counter. My temple ended up cutting open and she was yelling some bull crap at me again. I think she was insulting my family or something. Her parents came in and pulled her away from me. I took my chance to grab my backpack and apologize for bleeding on their countertop. Ivy's dad told me that he'll drive me home, but he instead drove me to the police station. He was pissed. At first, I didn't know why he was so pissed off, so it was terrifying. He was silent in the car and awkward because I could tell that he was seething. I thought he was pissed at me. "I'm sorry for bleeding on your counter." "That's not what I'm pissed off at, Chris." Ivy's dad responded in a very calm tone. "Oh," I replied. I was confused when we got to the police station. "What are we doing here?" I asked. "You're going inside and filing a report on what Ivy had done to you," Ivy's dad stated. I just nodded and went inside the police station with him following me. It didn't work. The officer that was talking to me and writing notes most likely didn't believe me. He was giving me this disbelieving look like I was drunk and telling him that I'm a UFO abductee who just got probed. Also, during the time that I was in there, Ivy was text bombing me, blaming me for getting yelled at by her mother because Ivy believed that I was at home and not in the police station. A few days later, I actually met the guy she was cheating on me with. I broke up with her after that awkward meeting. I also kind of wanted a reason to dump her. Besides the whole hitting me thing and her accidentally getting CPS involved because of her daily beatings. With the CPS thing, some teachers got concerned about my well-being because of the bruises and black eyes that Ivy kept giving me. Since they're supposed to go to the police over something about suspected abuse, they have to talk to the police about it. My siblings and I had one interview clarifying that our parents weren't harming us, and they didn't bother us again. I had told them that it was my girlfriend, and they seemed like they didn't believe me because when I explained what was going on, they acted like I was telling them that we have the Loch Ness Monster in our shed, and that we regularly feed it small children and bathe it in a kiddie pool. They didn't return after that. I guess they didn't see anything wrong with my mother passed out on the couch in nothing but a bathrobe and a red thigh-high boot, or my dad passed out on the coffee table in nothing but his boxers. But hey, we didn't get separated, so that's an upside. Anyway, I wasn't sure how to feel about dumping her. On one hand, I was upset over it, and on the other hand, I was actually relieved over finally getting rid of that douche. On my not-existent third hand, I was glad that she wasn't stressing me out anymore. Summer break was 2 weeks away, and I was stressed to high heaven. Upcoming tests were stressing me out, my grades that had plummeted because of Ivy were stressing me out, my now former abusive relationship with Ivy was stressing me out, and my unholy amount of stress was stressing me out. Anyway, I was busy stressing myself out in mine and Jolly's room when Ivy texted me. She wanted to talk about our relationship to see if it could be saved after her cheating on me or if we were better separated. Did I mention that it was Saturday and that this was 2:30 in the morning and that she was standing outside in the front yard? I stupidly agreed to talk to her about it and put my shoes on to go outside and see what she wanted. She was out by my dad's car, which was in the driveway. I stood on the porch, still able to see her. "What?" I asked. Ivy waved me over with both hands. "Come here, I want to see you." I was tired, so I didn't really think about the fact that she could see me clearly on the porch. She wasn't that far away, and the porch light was on. I went to stand in front of her, and she put her hands behind her back. "What?" I asked again. "I would say sorry, but I'm not sorry," Ivy said as she started lowering her arms. Before I could ask what that meant, I got stabbed in the stomach. It was obviously very painful. I would have been worried if it didn't hurt. I felt the heat throughout my body. She knocked me on the ground and proceeded to stab me repeatedly. Instead of heat, getting stabbed was now growing colder. The adrenaline kicked in and made the stabbing feeling more annoying than painful. It felt more like getting jabbed repeatedly with the handle of a butter knife, except Ivy was stabbing me with a chef's knife instead. I didn't feel it because the shock was now settling in. Also, I have very messed up reactions. I underreact in horrifying situations. Like now, for example. I really was more annoyed at being stabbed repeatedly and calm about it. While in a minor situation, like how I thought I lost my student ID, I was panicking because I thought I would starve to death because I couldn't buy lunch without it. I could have hit her or something to get her away from me, but I didn't want to be known as the douchebag who hit a woman despite trying to defend myself from, being stabbed to death. The murder in her eyes and her breath on my face still haunts me. I wasn't entirely sure how long the attack lasted, maybe 5 minutes or something, but she was gone. I tried to get up and go back inside, but I didn't quite make it. I can't really remember much of what happened afterwards. I do remember seeing flashing lights. I blinked and found myself in the waiting room of the hospital. The window showed white light, but it wasn't blinding, and everything was quiet. I was alone in the waiting room. I knew I was in the waiting room. I went to the door and tried to push the door open, but it wouldn't budge. I went to the fire exit and tried to push that open, but it wouldn't budge. I was beginning to panic. Why weren't the doors opening? I went to one of those side tables that has a plant and old magazines on it that people don't even bother reading or looking at, and I went to find another exit. "What happened to you?" a girl asked. I turned around to see a girl, maybe 10, 11 years old. She was wearing a hospital gown and a plastic bracelet. I looked down to see what I was wearing. I was wearing my t-shirt and flannel pajama pants that I usually wore to bed. My clothes were bloodied, along with my arms from where Ivy had cut them, and I put my arms up to keep from being stabbed in the face. "I got stabbed," I said. "By who?" asked the girl. "My girlfriend," I responded. "Why would she do that?" asked the girl. I was now annoyed. It annoyed me when Holly did that annoying why game. It was even more annoying now. "She's a jerk," I said. "Oh," replied the girl. "She's one of those women." I wasn't entirely sure what she meant by those women. I noticed that down the hallway, there was a dark shadow making its way around the corner. I would like to say that I was brave, but I turned and ran into the other direction. I probably confused the girl, but I'm not here to make friends, especially not with children. I ran down the hallway and up a flight of stairs, luckily not tripping. I stopped by the vending machine, which was empty. "My mother poisoned my sister and I," said the girl. I jumped. "I'm Serafina. What's your name?" "I'm Christmas," I said. Serafina gave me a strange look. "No, really." I looked at my hospital bracelet with my full name on it and showed it to Serafina. "Why did your parents name you after a holiday?" Serafina asked. "My parents wanted to have a holly jolly Christmas, so they named my sister, brother, and I that," I explained. "I feel bad for you and your brother," said Serafina. "Me too," I replied. I feel like I've been saying "me too" a lot lately. "Why did your girlfriend stab you?" asked Serafina. I had to think about that. I don't know. She broke up with me and then decided to stab me for some reason. "Does it hurt getting stabbed?" asked Serafina. "Very," I replied. "What does it feel like?" asked Serafina. Why did I know that she was going to ask me that? "It's a cold knife entering and slicing apart your skin," I said. Serafina grimaced. "It sounds horrible." "It is," I said. I noticed the black shadow coming down the hallway. The hallway light started flickering before going out. It seemed to absorb the white light from the windows. I immediately felt chills down my arms. "I gotta run!" I ran away from the shadow. It was kind of embarrassing that a 10-year-old girl was more brave than I was. Ivy was right about me being a little wimp. I had to stop and put my hand on the nearest wall to hold onto when I felt a strange shock through my body. I calmed down enough to continue walking, trying to find an exit to the hospital. I just wanted to get away from that weird shadow and admittedly Serafina, who was beginning to annoy me with her questions. I don't want to sound like a jerk or anything, but I had just been stabbed probably 5 times. I don't want to deal with anything. And then reality slapped me in the face. What was the shadow following? Or maybe even, why was it following me? How come I'm walking around with no problem? How come I'm not feeling any pain from what happened? I looked at my arms. There were obvious slices in them, except they weren't bleeding, but they hadn't even scabbed over, so it was just an open wound. It was gross to look at. I really didn't want to know what my torso looked like. It was probably worse than my arms. You have questions too, Serafina stated. Where the heck did you come from? I asked. Serafina pointed down the hall. From there. You're highly unobservant. I just hit a new low. Instead of my ex-girlfriend insulting me, I'm now being insulted by a child who is a complete stranger to me. Great. As if I'm not feeling crappy enough, I muttered. I think it's time for us to move on, said Serafina. That shadow's been chasing me, too. I didn't want to think about what the shadow was. I refused to believe it, I said. I couldn't even say the word. I still had plenty of things to do. I wanted to look Ivy in the face and tell a court everything that she had done to me if she ever got arrested for attempted murder. I was looking for my sister when it showed up, said Serafina. I refused to believe it. But since Adelaide's not here, that means... She trailed off. She probably hasn't fully accepted it either. That probably explains the white light and why I couldn't open the door. Great, instead of closing the door, I can't open it. Thanks a lot, Panic at the Disco. I realized that going into the light is accepting. No. I ran again. I just can't accept what Serafina was telling me. I really didn't want to. Holly, Jay, and I entered this world together. It doesn't seem right if I leave this world without them. I always thought that we would leave together. Blue Oyster Cult saying, don't fear the Reaper. Well, it's obvious they hadn't met the Reaper because it's terrifying. I just kept running, only stopping when I got to the staff room. You know, only running just delays it, said Serafina. What do you want? I rudely asked. Serafina looked hurt, and I felt like a douchebag, which I admittedly was being. I just want you to accept your fate, Serafina stated calmly. She held her hand out to me. So, take my hand and come with me. No! I shouted and ran away again. And this time when I got around the corner, the shadow, or death, was now there. I stopped in my tracks and I noticed what looks like skeletal hands coming out from the shadows, reaching towards me. I noticed that a few seemed to have decaying flesh dangling from their bony arms. Christmas. Many voices seemed to hiss at me. Serafina. I backed away from death. Please, no, I begged. Christmas, the voices hissed. Serafina. You're just delaying the inevitable, Serafina said to me. You'll be at peace. Well, obviously I'm not at peace because I'm being chased down by Death, who wants to kidnap me and take me to the underworld or something. Serafina walked over to Death, and it looked like the shadow took her hand. Serafina turned around to face me, and there was a bright white light that made me cover my eyes. And then she was gone, but not Death. He was looming over me, growing taller. I staggered backwards and landed on my butt. I started crab walking backwards because Death kept expanding and sucking in all the light. I can feel the cold air it was emitting. So I did the one thing I can do. Beg like the coward that I am, and Ivy always told me I was. Please don't take my soul, I'm not ready to die, I begged as I backed up. Death just kept coming at me. At that point I'm thinking he's really determined to kidnap my soul. Please don't, I pleaded. I'm still using my soul. I haven't done all the things I wanted to do. I just want to continue living. Death still came at me, and there was a bright light. I had to close my eyes, and then I'm blinking and staring at the ceiling. I looked around and saw my parents and siblings sitting in chairs around my hospital bed. The beeping from the heart monitor said that I was alive, but I felt empty inside, like I was already dead.